In this video, I'm going to explain how you can set up and use a Zoom L-Series mixer as an audio interface. I will be using the L8. There's little difference between models as far as using them as an interface is concerned. The only difference is the input channel count. And at the end, I'm going to quickly show you how the audio settings for Studio One, Cubase, Sonar, Mixcraft, and Waveform can be set up. Your first stop will be to go to the Zoom's website. Go to the Support and Download tab, and there you will find your drivers and the manuals. I recommend you download those as well and follow those instructions for installing the driver. After you install the driver and the mixer is connected with the USB cable, check in Windows Settings under System and Sound. You should see the Zoom there as the audio device. Your computer sounds can definitely be played using the mixer. So what I do is I disable all these other audio devices to avoid conflicts. On the Properties page, I make sure to allow all apps to use this device. My sample rate is 48 and all enhancements are disabled. The Zoom doesn't install a desktop icon for its control panel like most interfaces do. It's found here in C Drive Program Files Zoom L8 driver. Just copy and paste this to your desktop. Open it up, and this is where you can set your sample rate and then the audio buffer size. I recommend starting out with 256, and then later on you can try experimenting with lower settings. Each mixer does have different input counts, but all are 4-channel output. This is marked on the last two highest channels of your mixer, as in 1, 2, and 3, 4. Those serve as both analog inputs, but then they are the digital USB return from your computer and all its music apps. Windows and those apps will use 1, 2. Normally, only your DAW can use 3, 4. So now let's go and set up these DAW's audio settings. We'll start with Studio One. The audio settings are found under Options. If you click here, this will open the audio setup page. This should show you the same settings that you made in the Zoom control panel. You can get at the control panel from here as well. Now double check that the sample rate is correct. Over here is the list of all your audio interfaces that have ASIO drivers installed on your computer. Open up a blank project and then you go to Song and Song Setup. Here you will see the Zoom's inputs and outputs. Now the confusing aspect of using the Zoom is the driver uses the master outputs as the default to inputs 1 and 2. There's a reason for that, and it's mostly to do with most people would want that for podcasting and stuff. But this doesn't quite work for us if what we're trying to do is record a live band. So you'll see that the other inputs are off by 2. In other words, channel 1 of the mixer shows as input 3. Well, Studio One has a really good setup option, so we can fix that. You can choose Rename, Reorder, and set up to use either stereo pairs or mono. So what I've done here is I've chosen all mono, and I moved that master to the bottom. And you're going to see why in a sec. While we're here, I'll show you this one very cool feature. I can save this setup as default, but also I can save it as a preset. I could create all sorts of different scenarios here and then save them and recall them. Now, don't forget to click Apply before you leave. I use the Add Tracks. Now here's another cool feature. It allows me to not only choose how many tracks I want and insert them, it lets me do this in ascending order. And it also does auto color. This saves having to manually do all of this. And you'll see in a few other DAWs, this can amount to quite a bit of work. The only thing that you have to do, though, and this is why I chose mono, because you can't have both stereo and mono when you do this. You can't mix them up. So they'd all be stereo or they'd all be mono. So you can see that it puts them all here and they're all correctly labeled. Track 1 here in the DAW is from channel 1 of the mixer. Next, Cubase Elements. Go to Studio, Studio Setup, and the audio system. And here, once again, you can verify you're using ASIO. And here is the list of audio interface drivers. And here we see it is set for my favorite 48. Then I will click on the Zoom ASIO driver tab here. Here's the Zoom's control panel access, and you can see that the list is in mono and has boxes for each input and output. So you can choose what you want to activate right here. Now, Cubase has an option of inserting multiple tracks, but they will all be the same input. So you have to add each track separately. There's no corresponding labels or colors either. Then what I would recommend doing is once you put all this time in here is save this as a project template. Cakewalk Sonar. Open Preferences, go to Playback and Recording, and make sure that ASIO is selected. Next, open the driver settings and check that your sample rate and that the zoom is the timing masters. On the Devices tab, make sure that all inputs and outputs are selected, well, unless you don't want them. This is actually a very confusing aspect of using Sonar because it shows the inputs and outputs as stereo pairs mixed in with odd numbers here. So it's very confusing for first-timers, but you do get used to it over time. Last stop is down here in sync and caching, and make sure the zoom is in this box here. Sonar is the only DAW that I know of that gets messed up by having generic drivers installed on your computer, like ASIO for all and those generic drivers. So this is where you'd find out if this is happening, because you really need it to say that it is using the zoom here, or your latency is going to be out of whack. If you find it, then what you need to do is open up the regedit app and look for it right here, and you just delete it. Then we can insert multiple tracks, but they're all one input. So just like Cubase, this all involves a lot of extra work to get this set up. So once again, you're going to want to save it as a project template. Mixcraft 10 Pro Studio. Open Preferences and then Sound Devices. Check that it says ASIO, and once again, there's only this strange looking list of stereo pairs. I guess this here, I can choose my default input for new tracks. I'm going to select input 1. Maybe that'll help speed something up. But here you go. You have to do them track by track. And with this weird list, I find this very confusing and it slows me down just because it's not that clear what I'm doing here. Left, right, what does that mean? I want to see channel 1, channel 2. That's what makes sense to me. Anyhow, once again, a lot of extra work, so make sure and save that template. Last but not least is good old Waveform 13. And of course, there's a free version. I'm using the Pro version, but I don't think anything I'm going to show you here would be different. You open the Settings tab. It has mono input list, and it's all correctly labeled. That's nice. All the settings and the zoom were automatically updated here, and it shows ASIO and 48 kilohertz. And here the zoom has its control panel, and here is the list as well. Everything's here. So, and with this one, I did come up with a kind of a neat solution. I unchecked the master bus, so it's out of my hair. Up here in the corner is a microscopic little track plus sign. There's a lot of that in this DAW. You got to have good eyesight to use Waveform. So I choose 10 tracks, but check this out. There's an option to assign inputs to consecutive tracks. Bingo! Everything is done, and the tracks are not only numbered, they have the same matching things to my mixer channel, and they are even colored. Bonus points to Waveform. While we're talking to you, I'm going to show you something that I don't think is in the manual, at least I couldn't find it. Did you know you can do loop-back recording? If you choose your computer's outputs, which are 1 and 2, this is for me channel 7. So this will be, of course, those other channels on the bigger mixers, but you'll figure that out. Just look for the one that says 1, 2. This is capable of sending back audio playback from your computer. Like you can be playing a YouTube and you can record it. To avoid feedback, you want to mute the track, as well as it might be a good idea to turn off the track monitor. So in conclusion, out of this, I didn't intend it to be like this, but it did allow me to discover quirks about these different DAWs. And I come away from this going, geez, Waveform, it's free. It was the easiest one to use. So it's almost a no-brainer. What you want to do is just take an old laptop out there and record your gigs, or even in your little home studio. You don't need much to do audio recording. So if I had the money, I would go for Studio One. Anyhow, I hope you found all of this interesting and informative. And as always, thanks for watching.